All right, so we got some pretty interesting news here. It says Bernie Sanders will give 2024, quote, a hard look if Biden doesn't run. Advisor. This is coming from one of Bernie Sanders' former advisors. You guys should hopefully know him if you are somebody who is, was big into Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign. It is his former campaign manager, Faiz Shakir. Now, it says Senator Bernie Sanders will likely take, quote, a hard look at launching a third bid for the presidency if President Biden chooses not to run in 2024, longtime advisor to the progressive senator said on Thursday. I assumed that he would give it a hard look, Faiz Shakir told CBS News. I don't want to make a judgment for him. Obviously, it would be his choice to make, but I assumed that he would want to reevaluate it. So he said he'd have to make a real judgment about his own vigor and his stamina and his desire and hunger and passion to do this a third time, Shakir said. But if it were an open field, yeah, I'm confident he would take another look at it. While Biden has yet to make a formal announcement, he and White House aides have previously said that he plans to run again in 2024. So, of course, we already know that Donald Trump has announced his race for the Republican nomination already. Ron DeSantis is highly likely to run. I would say, based on preponderance of the evidence, I'd say more likely than not, he's going to run. And so it's pretty interesting to see. Now, this seems to be about like more so if Biden doesn't decide to run. But it does look like all of the indications say that he is going to run. He seems pretty like dead set on running again, especially because he's pretty close to death. So he's probably like, what do I have to lose? That's kind of what it seems like for him. So he's definitely going to run. So if it were an open field, I would say you definitely run as Bernie. But I think Bernie would be like, what, like 83 or something like that? Something like, really old. I don't think it's really going to work. And the only way I could see Bernie somehow winning would be, if one of two things were to happen, essentially. There's one key thing that Bernie Sanders is the big block with Bernie Sanders. It's the black vote. It's the African-American vote. And that is a huge, huge share of the Democratic primaries. And what we've seen is whichever, Democratic nominee is able to do like really well with African-American voters, they're the one that's able to win. So, Bill Clinton, amazing with black voters. Obama, Hillary eventually too, very good with black voters, right? And so they end up doing very well. Joe Biden, really, really crazy good with black voters. I still can't believe how much of the African-American vote share Joe Biden got, considering there were like 16 candidates or whatever. It's absolutely bonkers to me, honestly. It's pretty crazy. But I don't know if you guys heard this story. It says Biden pushes South Carolina as first primary state, elevates Georgia and Michigan. So Biden is trying to really push hard for South Carolina as the first primary state. I think Iowa being the first primary state is going to die off. It's like the crazy caucuses and stuff. But remember, Biden was saved by South Carolina. That was where he just absolutely destroyed everybody, basically. Howard Schultz had basically failed to, what the polls were indicating was he was going to pull a large share of the black vote from Biden. That didn't end up happening. And so he didn't have that plurality impact. And so if it was like a Biden v. Bernie 1v1, you would expect Biden to pick up all of the black vote. But there was like 16 candidates. So you're like, what the hell? How does he manage to still get so much of the black vote? So it appears that the African-American vote is extremely monolithic, where in a race with like 16 people, they went with, and there's Kamala Harris was in the race. She's a black woman, right? And they still went with Joe Biden. So it's like, wow. So clearly a very monolithic voting base, right? So he had a big staff shakeup right in the lead up to that 2020 run, where basically the core of his strategists they decided to part ways because they just didn't have the same vision. So that was, Mark Longabaugh, Tad Devine, and Julian Mulvey, who I think are all part of like the same political consulting firm. But basically, Longabaugh had basically told him that, hey, you need to make inroads with the black community. You need to have dinners with like Jim Clyburn. You have to get an operation to actually get black voters in the South. That's what you have to do. You specifically need black voters in the South. In other areas, it's not as important because those can be offset by other voters like in the northern areas or whatever, right? Like a state like Michigan isn't going to be as like struggling with the black vote as it is in South Carolina. Because if you can't get South Carolina black vote, it means you're going to get destroyed because that's the majority of the vote in South Carolina, right? And so he failed to do it. I think his biggest African-American person in terms of like trying to bring that in was like Nina Turner. But Nina Turner's from Ohio, which I think is considered like Midwest, definitely not the South. So that's obviously not going to do anything for you. But like this article says, Sanders certainly recognized the challenge and he's done little mechanically to address it so far. There are no African Americans in the ranks of his senior 2020 campaign advisors. He has struggled to hire a top black organizer to run his South Carolina operation, where in 2016 he lost 84 to 16% among black voters. I see signs that the senator understands the work that needs to be put into winning black votes, says Simone Sanders, who ran Bernie's 2016 South Carolina organization and who was frustrated by the lack of support from the campaign's leadership. His biggest misstep was that he didn't spend enough time in the state. It was like pulling teeth to get him to leave the Senate to go campaign. Now he's done events all over the country that pay attention to the black electorate, but there are only 4 people who know how to run a winning statewide operation in South Carolina, and 3 of them are already working for someone else. Bernie's people courted Jalissa Washington Price real hard to run South Carolina, and she went with Kamala Harris. So again, you have to be able to, and this was like right in the run-up, I believe, this is 2019, February 2019, so just when the candidates were starting to announce their run, basically. And so this will be like the big roadblock, unless some kind of mathematics change, which I don't know, I know the young vote just went crazy right now in this midterm election. So, and I had thought like, oh, young person vote doesn't really matter because they don't really vote that much. But it turns out, hey, they do really matter. So maybe the math changes. But from what I'm seeing, whoever's going to be able to win, especially a progressive, is whoever can manage to get that African-American vote, which is going to be difficult because most of the African-American vote is older voters. So they're just going to vote for, the more, corporate down the line people. But it's just so shocking to me how monolithic the vote was in 2020, considering that it was like, wow, like there was like 16, some crazy, it was like complete just absolute bonkers, like a complete just mania of a race, right? And yet somehow all of them voted for Biden. It's like, whoa, I don't know. Very bizarre. But, I even posted up a poll over on my community tab. So do you think Bernie Sanders should run for president in 2024? So far, it's 765 votes. Yes is 53, no is 32. Now, I didn't put in whether or not Biden doesn't run. I'm sure if the number would go up if it was that Biden doesn't run, because then it's really like a free-for-all, right? But, if even my progressive audience is saying 32% say no, 53% saying yes, that's a huge, huge deal in terms of like he probably shouldn't run. So if Biden doesn't run, I would say it's like if he's willing to, I guess it would be worth the shot anyways for him to run, right? If Biden runs, there's no point in running, I would say, unless you would want to like challenge Joe Biden. But I think that would just probably that might just end up causing more problems than it's worth, honestly, because you'll just hurt the progressive movement in the long run by making yourself look like super antagonistic towards the corporate wing. And you have to be able to pull normies to be able to win races, right? So I think it would just be a waste, and just a waste of money and stuff. I know the idea would be you could get concessions from Biden, but I just don't think you'd be able to do it. And he would definitely lose. But if Biden doesn't run, then it would be fine. It would be him against Kamala Harris, who would be like the next in line of, the Clintonian dynasty, essentially, right? When like Bill, Hillary Obama, and then, now Joe Biden, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that would end up being. But if Joe Biden doesn't run, I guess he could. But again, he would need to be serious about really making inroads with the black community. But it's probably too late anyways. If he were to have really made inroads with the black community, he would have had to have started already by now. But it doesn't really seem like he's interested in it at all. And I don't know if he doesn't know that that's the big problem with his campaign, or what is going on, but that's the big roadblock. And so if Bernie can't do that, he's not going to be able to win. There's just no way. It's impossible. There's too many delegates in the South. It's a vast majority black votes. So if you're getting like 85-15, like you could win, I would say, if you do well enough in other areas, and then you get like 60-40, like Biden gets 60, you get 40 of the black vote, like that should be good. Like you should be able to survive that potentially, but you'd have to be able to subsidize that loss with like other areas, right? Which can be difficult because those voting groups vote less monolithically, right? Whereas like the black vote is super monolithic. So it's really hard to, be able to slice it up. Again, like 17 candidates ran, something crazy like that, and all of them voted for Biden. So it's kind of like, oh, damn. You know what I'm saying? So big crazy stuff here. Let me know what your thoughts are, though. Should he run again in 2024? If Biden runs, if he doesn't run, what do you guys think? I know there's a lot of conversation about, is there going to be a progressive challenge to Biden in 2024? But I can't see it happening. His approval ratings aren't that low as of right now, historically, compared to like modern presidents. So his approval isn't really that bad. And then it's very taboo. It's almost like super taboo to run. I mean, I don't even know when the last time we had that was, where like an incumbent is challenged by somebody in his own party. But let me know your thoughts down below.